Hello, it's Hank with another special Ask Hank Anything, which is just you asking Hank anything in the comments this time of our video that we did with Jacob Collier. I have a bunch of good questions that I'm excited to answer. And I figured I should just start doing that. This first one comes from Onwards to Victoria, who asks, do all cultures have the same understanding of musical notes? Like if I'm singing a song and I know there's a note I can't hit, I instinctively go what I think is an octave higher or lower. Is that truly instinctual, or was I socialized this way? So this is super cool because there is a part of this that is physical and a part that is cultural. Octaves are actually based on physical properties of sound. When a note, which is something that we hear, which is vibrations in the air, when that doubles in frequency, our brains interpret that as the same note but higher. This octave relationship shows up in almost every musical tradition ever studied. Even infants seem to recognize it. So yes, there's definitely something fundamentally human about hearing and responding to octaves, and also there are other whole number ratios that we hear as harmonies. I learned about this many years ago, and I still cannot get over the fact that my ear can hear the math of vibrations. That doesn't seem like it should work. I still don't really get why it works. But there's also a cultural part, how we use octaves and intervals and how music is more broadly structured is heavily shaped by the culture that you're in. Western music divides the octave into 12 evenly spaced tones and then builds the melodies and harmonies out of those. Other musical systems use different scales and intervals and tuning systems. In Arabic music, there's tons of microtones, which are like pitches between the notes on a piano. There are other systems that have scales that don't divide the octave evenly, so there's not an equal space between each tone. And you can feel this when you listen to music from other cultures. You can feel that they are making choices that you almost physically couldn't make inside of your own music system. And I just think that that is also extraordinarily cool. Music is great. What a weird thing that we do. Kira540 asks, I have a question about wind. What if the wind was exactly the same temperature as the skin? If there was no sensation of temperature change, but the other two sensations still happened, would it still feel like wind? So this question turned out to be more fascinating than I expected it to be. So my first instinct was, I think I've actually experienced this, but it's not just about temperature. So if the skin is 93 degrees Fahrenheit and it's 93 degrees out, the wind is probably still gonna feel cool because of evaporation. There will be tiny drops of sweat on your skin that will be evaporating into the wind as it blows across you, and the hottest molecules of that water are gonna be ones leaving behind the cooler molecules. But let's imagine that it's either warmer than that, or it's 93 degrees out and 100% humidity. So the air can hold no more water and evaporation isn't happening. This is what I feel like I've experienced, and it does feel weird. A warm wind feels strange. The wind is usually this comforting thing that cools you down. So when it doesn't, especially when it actually warms you up, when it adds temperature to your body, it's so weird feeling. And it kind of doesn't feel like wind. It does feel like wind, but it feels specifically like hot wind. And now I'm going to 100% guess something that seems like a real phenomenon that I had not ever noticed, and I don't know that anybody has ever noticed. Hot winds are much more likely to be named winds. They just feel different, there's something odd and special, and they don't feel like wind, so we give them names. The Santa Ana winds are hot winds, the Sirocco in the Mediterranean, the Chinook winds in the Pacific Northwest, the Casman in Egypt. These are all hot winds that have names, and I can't think of any normal winds that just have names, or cold winds that have names. However, let me know in the comments, are there other named hot winds? And do you know of named normal winds? There's storm systems that are named, like hurricane or nor'easter, but just like a wind? I don't know. Olivia Martinez asks, what is the science behind a pretty sunset? How do the clouds turn so many colors at dusk? And more importantly, is there a way to predict when there will be a colorful sunset, or what conditions are necessary to have one? Air is stuff. I say this a lot, because it is very important and also very easy to forget. In part because air seems pretty transparent, but it can also absorb and scatter light. Sometimes we think of the sun as being yellow. It is in fact not yellow, it is white, but the atmosphere, mostly the nitrogen and oxygen in the atmosphere, that's the lion's share of it, scatters blue light more than other wavelengths. So the sun looks like white without blue, which is yellow, and the sky looks like blue without all the other colors, which is blue. So when you look up at the sky, what you are seeing is air. You are seeing the air. But this is just a first step on our understanding of sunsets. So as the sun gets lower in the horizon, from your perspective, the light from the sun is traveling through more of the atmosphere, more air. So more of the blue light is getting scattered away. So the sunlight gets more and more orange, even red. And at the same time, a sneaky thing is happening. The sky is getting darker because there's just less light. But as long as it isn't being blocked by anything, the sunlight can still reach the clouds, even after the sun has set for you, because the clouds are higher, so the sun hasn't set for them yet. Another hint that the Earth isn't flat. I don't know how they think sunsets happen, but that wasn't your question. The darker sky, plus clouds being lit up by the warm wavelengths of the sun that hasn't been scattered away, is what gets you those bright, vibrant sunsets, because the sky above them is darker and the clouds are super lit up. As for what conditions you need, no low clouds blocking the sun out. That's your main problem. That can really spoil things. But also you want to have those higher up clouds to get lit up, and thin clouds also that don't absorb all the light, but are able to scatter it back down to you. One Cup of Jojo asks, do musicians' brains differ from most other people's brains, and if so, in what way? So anything that we do is going to change our brains. But musicians have spent a lot of time training a very specific set of abilities, and that actually does change their brains in measurable ways. To be clear, we're not talking about like differences from birth, like there's a musician born and you can scan their brain and be like, that's going to be a musician. We're talking about differences that happen because musicians do different stuff. So they change their own brains. And what are those changes? Musicians tend to have stronger connections between the two sides of their brain, especially in areas that handle movement and sound, which might actually be why Jacob was able to do the arm-leg challenge thing when I can't do it. Their motor and auditory regions are also often more developed, which makes sense. And research has shown that the biggest differences are in people who start playing music earlier in life, like before the age of 7, which does not mean that it's too late for you. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that musicians have better auditory processing and motor coordination, but they also tend to have better memory. And some research also shows that they use their brains differently than non-musicians during language games or multitasking challenges, which I think is very weird. We're all inside our own brains experiencing the universe through our own lenses, and that absolutely fascinates me. Like that there's a person out there who just does stuff differently from me because they played a lot of piano. BL3446 asks, from a climate change / global warming perspective, what is the downside of incentivizing the burning of fossil fuels if the carbon is being adequately captured at the emissions point? I'll note this assumes no leaky methane pipelines and 100% capture of stack emissions. Are there other warming-based downsides? So first, I'm just not going to give it to you. I'm not going to assume that there's no methane leakage because there's never been no methane leakage. Most of our fossil fuel electricity in the US now comes from methane, which is a much cleaner fuel than coal. But during the production and transmission of methane, lots of it slips through the cracks and into the atmosphere. But it's a gas. So when there's a methane leak, there isn't like an oil spill, and it isn't treated like that big of a deal. So leaks are more treated as a loss of revenue, like a loss of the fuel itself, not as something to worry about environmentally, which it is like less of an environmental concern than an oil spill. But methane is a really potent greenhouse gas, and a lot of it is being released by the methane industry. About 23% of global methane emissions come from leaks in the transmission and mining of methane. What do they call it? Is it mining? It's not mining. Drilling for methane? A big concern is that the fossil fuel industry tends to use the imagined future, where we capture all of our CO2, as a reason why we don't need to change, without ever actually facing the reality that creating that infrastructure has never been a priority for them and may never be economically viable. There's been a lot of talk about capturing CO2 coming out of power plants, but it's a huge industrial endeavor, and no one has ever actually done it for a whole power plant. Using this as a well, we don't need to change, we could just do carbon capture someday is, I think, an incorrect way to think about things when we see no evidence that we actually might do that someday. Next question is from Isabel Ledger. So when you talk a lot, you get thirsty. But when you drink, it goes down the eaty pipe and not the speaky pipe. So how come drinking fixes the dryness problem that I would assume is in the speaky pipe and not the eaty pipe? I don't know. I have some guesses, but I would love for somebody who feels like they have more information about this, who has like some expertise in this area, to tell me how I'm doing on this. What I'm vibing out is that the speaky pipe, the trachea, and the Edie pipe, the esophagus, have a shared area that is part of what gets dried out. Like it feels like it's a lot of the soft palate back there, and that is shared by both. That's before the split. And that does, I think, get quite dry when you talk a lot, like I've been talking a lot for this video, and it feels quite dry right now, and I feel like I'd like to drink a glass of water, and that would be part of what is like getting moistened and is making me feel better. So that's one of 3 things I have to guess here. Number 2 is that there's just like a sensation of thirstiness that goes away when you drink because the body has received what it asked for. And so maybe the feeling of dryness goes away because the feeling of dryness is actually the feeling of your body asking for water. But it feels like there's more to it than that as a person who often talks a lot and gets dry throat. And here is my guess, because there isn't any water that goes down the Edie pipe. You're not getting your trachea wet. Don't do that. Don't do that. I am guessing that a part of what makes this feel better when you take a glass of water is just like the motions that you're going through over and over again when you're talking are different from the motions that you go through when you drink. And so what's getting tired are all of the like talking muscles, and those are sort of like locked into place and maybe get a little bit strained. And then you swallow a bunch of water and that just moves everything around. Maybe that lubricates stuff, maybe it cleans stuff up a little bit, maybe it loosens the muscles involved. But that is a guess. But it feels like it feels right. But that doesn't mean it's right. All right, everybody, it's our last question, and I didn't write down who asked it. I'm sorry, it didn't get copied into the document. But the question is, how does the steam on mirrors remember what you draw on it? So if you aren't familiar with this phenomenon, if your mirror gets steamed up when you're taking a shower and then you like draw a smiley face, the next time you take a shower, that smiley face will be back, which is cool. And it happens because you are oily and gross. Even right after you get out of the shower, you're gonna have oils on your fingers. And if you draw that smiley face, you're not just wiping away the fog, you are also adding some finger oils to the mirror. You're familiar with fingerprints. That's what this is. So then the next time your bathroom steams up during a shower, water is going to condense on the cooler surface of the mirror. So basically there's water vapor in the air. The mirror surface is cooler. And so the air can hold a lot of water vapor, but the air very near the mirror is cooling down, and cold water can hold less water vapor. And so the water vapor condenses out onto the mirror. But it's not going to do that evenly. It's going to do that evenly on all the clean parts. But in everywhere you touched, a little bit of that oil got left behind, and oil, as we know, is hydrophobic. So that means that the tiny water droplets are going to be less likely to condense right there, or they're going to condense in a different pattern. They're going to repel that water just a little bit. So it is, of course, not the steam that is remembering. It is the glass that was altered by your touch. And that changes how the water behaves on it later. And that is all it takes to turn your mirror into like a weird secret message board. Thank you for watching Ask Hank Anything. Our episode with Jacob Collier is out if you haven't watched it. It's really good. Jacob was a delight. And if you have not yet subscribed to the Complexly YouTube channel, you can do that right now. There is a subscribe button somewhere nearby.